So imagine this. You've just inherited 100 acres of beautiful coastal waterfront property from a great aunt. It's your dream come true, and you've got lots of different things you'd like to do on it. You'd like to build a house, have a garden, a shop, and some businesses. You want people to come and visit, and you want it to be healthy for your kids and others in the future. So what's the first thing you're going to do, besides having a huge party and bonfire? Well, you're probably going to want to talk to your family and agree on the vision for this piece of land, what you want to look like, and what some of your goals might be. You probably also want to get to know the land itself and see what's possible and what the potentials are, what kind of things would be good for it, and what it has to offer. You may even want to look at other similar pieces of land and see what's worked for other people and what hasn't. And of course, if there are already people living there and using the area, you probably also want their opinions and knowledge. That same process that you're going through with that fantastic piece of land is exactly what we've been doing on the West Coast as part of our coastal mapping work. But before we tell you more about what we're doing, we should introduce ourselves. We are West Coast Aquatic, and we bring together people who live and work on the west coast of Vancouver Island. That includes governments, businesses, First Nations, tourists, researchers, recreationalists, and foundations. All these different people and bodies realize that they all use the same coastal waters and will collectively prosper if the area is maintained, and will collectively suffer if it's unhealthy. We are fortunate to have one of the most beautiful coastal areas in the world that's rich with different resources, culture, people, and business. And our focus is to make sure that it's going to continue to be beautiful and rich for generations to come. We've produced other videos that talk about vision, values, goals, social and ecological assessment work, and our approach to strategies and actions. This video is about the coastal mapping part of our work. So where were we? Oh right, your recently inherited dream piece of waterfront property. We did exactly what you would do. First, we looked around internationally to see how other coastal areas have gone about it. We looked in Australia, Europe, North America, and Asia at different models of how people have tried to plan for and produce healthy coastal environments and communities. Then we started gathering all the information we could, from governments and literature and different sources, everything that existed about the area. We also started interviewing local people about their knowledge of the area. They told us about their long histories or current uses and things they were excited about. And when we talked to businesses, they told us about how they use the area economically. We also heard about people's recreational interests, spiritual interests, and their visions, and the kind of values to keep the area one of the best coasts in the world. Finally, we talked about the issues that are happening in the area now, and some of the current and future opportunities, so we can plan for now and later. To do this, we held community meetings and dialogue sessions. We did interviews and surveys, and worked with individuals, government officials, and closely with First Nations, who have lived here the longest and have a unique relationship to the coastal area. So we collected lots of information, but what did we do with all that information and knowledge? The first thing we produced was an atlas that shows all the features, uses, and activities in the area. There are over 100 different layers of information in our atlas. They include things like locations of different habitat for various species, and areas for kayaking or fishing. Some of this information existed before, and some of it is entirely new. Now, if you think about your beautiful piece of coastal property that you just inherited, think about not just planning for the whole property, but for specific things that you're going to build and do on it. So imagine, for instance, the house that you want to build. When you think about designing it, you're going to have to figure out how much space you want for bedrooms, for the dining room and kitchen, storage, entertainment, and guests. All those kind of things. So in the same way that you're planning for your house with areas for different uses and needs, we looked at Clayoquot and Barkley Sounds and laid out 25 planning units for Barkley Sound and 20 for Clayoquot Sound, which are like the rooms within the house for those areas. For each of those, we laid out some of the goals, objectives, and strategies that people told us about for those places. This gave us a good idea of what kind of things people want to see and what types of actions could be taken in those areas. We also described the characteristics of each of those planning units, or rooms. That would be things like what kinds of marine plants or fish tend to be in the area, what kinds of existing activities are already happening there, and what are the beaches and currents like, and other things that make the areas unique. Then we started to describe what kind of things would fit best in those areas, what would be uses of those areas that would be acceptable, and what kind of things wouldn't go very well there. So within each of those areas, we started to map out how you would lay things out in the room. For instance, in the kitchen, where are you going to put your stove, counters, and table? That's kind of like the zones that we did for each planning unit. So in one planning unit, you might have different areas that are really good for recreational activity, or another that's great for some type of business, or one area that's ecologically sensitive and should be left alone. Or maybe there's even another that acts like a hallway and is simply good for just moving through. Then, we also looked at the whole area of Barkly and Clayoquot Sounds and identified what kinds of conflicts and compatibilities exist between different uses. In some cases, there are obvious conflicts, like chances are you don't want to put your toilet in your kitchen, or build one big bedroom for your teenager and grandmother to share. But in other cases, things can be quite compatible, like a garage for the tools, cars, and boat, as opposed to each having their own separate building. These examples are the same as the conflicting nature of shellfish farms and float homes, or the synergy created by building a few docks or boat ramps that can service many users as opposed to each having to build their own infrastructure. Once we'd collected all this information and turned it into maps of the overall area and the different plan units, it was clear that it would be helpful to have a few different options to look at as far as how things are laid out. This would be the same as creating a few different options for how your garden, house, and other areas are laid out on your property. So we are creating 2 or 3 different scenarios for both Barkly and Clayoquot Sound to see which one meets our goals the best. Now that's a pretty tricky thing to do because we're dealing with such a big area and there are so many different trade-offs. You often can't achieve all your goals at once. You may get some of this and some of that, but can't necessarily get all of both. To help us with this, we have partnered with some smart, fun people from Stanford University who are developing a tool called Marine Invest, which takes the different options and scenarios that we give them and comes back to us and tells us how each of them score against the things we care about most. This can help us make the most informed decisions about which combination of things will help us achieve our vision and goals for the area. Now once we decide which arrangement works best for us, then what happens? Well, then we've got arguably the most important part of our work, which is putting this into action or implementing it, and we can make this happen in a number of ways. First, we can work with governments to turn our maps and preferred option into regulations and policies. Second, we can also work with lots of groups to do projects and activities in the area to help address some of the issues and move us forward, like beach cleanups, habitat restoration, new business development, or infrastructure upgrades. We can also do research and education that helps us build a better understanding of what's happening in the area and how we can improve our health and wealth. We can come up with different tools to help people make decisions or find information. For instance, we can develop a tool to help someone find the best place for a business to operate. This could also help governments who review applications from those businesses to make the most informed decisions in a more timely and streamlined way. Finally, we can set up a monitoring program for all the different areas and planning units that tells us whether we are continuing to move in the direction of our vision over time or whether we're going in the opposite direction, and why. Making our dream happen will involve all the different members who make up West Coast Aquatic, including governments, businesses, nonprofits, academics, and others, all working together through the SAWAC partnership and coordinated by the West Coast Aquatic directors and staff. Now this may seem like a lot of work, but it's fun, interesting, and totally worth it. The west coast of Vancouver Island is beautiful and unique in this world. Its land and water feeds us and protects us. The ocean is a mystery, and lots of little and big creatures, communities, and businesses face great odds these days. We're only going to overcome them with some dreams, schemes, and teams of good people. We may not be able to do everything, but we know small changes make a big difference. Everything is connected, and we know that when people like us and you do something big together, it sends ripples abroad and into the future. So either join us in the SAWAC partnership or make something similar happen where you live. You'll be creating a gift that will keep giving back to you, your family, and friends, and future generations of people who live, love, and work on the coast.